¿Te vas a sentar? Ya se ven de todo. Hello. All right, I think we're gonna get started. Welcome everybody to Rearte. I am Viva Padilla. I'm the owner of the space, and I'd love to welcome you all to our third installment of well, it's our second installment of Chicanismo 101, but it's our third time having a presentation here with Ernesto Ayala, Vice Chair of La Raza Unida. The first presentation that he had here was the Aslan to Palestine presentation, which is really amazing, very informative. And if you want to check it out, it's on YouTube for the store. So it's Rearte Centro Literario, and the YouTube is that. So you can look that up. And you can look at the prior presentation about Aslan too, that he did a month ago. So, yeah, without further ado, we're gonna get started. And some people may be trickling in, so just don't mind that. We're gonna dim the lights because we have this whole presentation set up. And feel free to take pictures, feel free to take notes. And at the end, we're gonna be able to ask questions. And Ernesto will be happy to answer any questions relating to the presentation, La Raza Unida, Palestine, anything like that. So just feel free to pick his brain. So thank you so much, Ernesto, for being here with us again. It's always an honor. It's always a lot of fun, and it's always very interesting. And it also is very like empowering as a Chicana to understand more of like who we are. So I really appreciate that you take the time out to spend time with us here in Boyle Heights, coming from Coima. See. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of close the door a little bit so there can be a little bit more of a, quiet, quiet room because it is very loud on Cesar Chavez. So yeah, we'll get started right now. So just, let's do it.
Thank you, Vincent. Yeah, I'd like to thank you all, ¿verdad? Thank our compañera Viva for allowing us this space, ¿verdad? I am from La Raza Unida, I'm the vice chair, former chair. I grew up in La Raza Unida. My dad, one of the founders in the San Fernando Valley, of the chapter over there. And I think this is very important, that we have these forums because we're at a war of ideas. There's a lot of ideas. Part of the thing in society, when you're trying to transform society, when you're trying to build movimiento, is there's ideas. There's wrong ideas and there's correct ideas. And we're correct. Yeah, but we're at war because there's a lot of misinformation out there on purpose. There's a lot of confusion, on purpose, and we're at war against all that because that confuses so many of our people, and it takes away from their will to want to fight because we have to fight, and fighting, by fighting, I mean organizing, mobilizing our people, because that's how you build power and strength, as a people. So we have to know our history, we have to know the ideas that have evolved in our movimiento, They have come from our own people, They haven't come from the academy, they've come from the raza, from the everyday working class, Chicanos, Mexicanos, raza, indigenous people here in our barrios and what we call Aslan, so I think that means a lot, that we're able to have this space and discuss these things, present these things, afterwards, like compañera said, we could talk about them, it's not just you learning, it's me learning as well, this is like a dialectical back and forth. It's not just like me, like, we're sharing here, we're learning from each other. So, yeah, thank you, like she said, the first presentation was Aslan to Palestine. If you're able to see that one on the YouTube, I think it's important because with everything going on right now, you'll see that, like them, Chicanos, the Raza here in Aslan, we have a lot in common with the Palestinians that they have recognized as well. Then I did another one on Aslan to talk about the concept and where that originates from, ¿verdad? And then this one on Chicano, the same idea, where Chicano, the word originates from, or, everything that's been through for a very long time that the word has existed, what it means and all that. So, yeah, thank you, ¿verdad? So, estamos. Chicano.
Just bear with me because they're a little bit out of order.
So there's a quote, I think it symbolizes a lot of what we mean, you know, just to get the presentation out. It's from Corky Gonzalez, Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, who was a Chicano leader. He organized Colorado, Crusade for Justice, and he also became a leader in the Raza Unida party. And it says, we aren't just Chicanos, a minority in the United States of America. We are Chicanos and Latinos, quote unquote Latinos, for a majority of Aztlan, of Mexico, Central America, and South America. We are a part of a majority. So he's getting that idea of, you know, Chicanos are not just this group in the United States. We're a part of a much bigger people, indigenous people. You know, I would even argue that we're part of Northern Native America, but that, as Chicanos, we connect both worlds. So, you know, I just wanted to share that. I think that kind of kicks us off to what I'm, you know, trying to get to. So Chicano, what is a Chicano? It was just it was just see everyone there trying to figure out what is a Chicano or Chicana, Chicanx. Nobody really agrees. Sí, so, yeah, just that.
We usually don't have this problem, but for some reason the slides are acting up today.
It's all good.
Yeah.
So let's go back in the Chicano timeline. See, so we're going back in time. The editor over here. So the most widely accepted story regarding the origin of Chicano is that when the Spanish arrived and asked the Mexica, those are the people in the central valley of Mexico, who they were, and they said Mexica, they changed the ship sound to H, like the H, sounding like or J in Spanish, and thus Mexicano. Eventually, in some areas, it lost the me, and thus Chicano. Chicano, after some time, became Chicano. So that's like one of the most accepted theories of the origin of that word, of Chicano. Chicana, obviously. This right here, yeah, I found interesting. It's called A New and Most Exact Description of America or the Fourth Part of the World, and it's in Latin up there, the same thing. And it was made in 1562 by Spanish cartographer Diego Gutierrez and this guy with a very funny name, Flemish artist. I don't want to say that. Hieronymus Cock. And the reason it's interesting is the next slide.
Sorry, I can't find.
B8, no.
Oh,
So you're still fighting Chicano. It's part of the whole thing. Chicano on the digital age. So this map has the first documented usage of Chicana for the name of a town at the mouth of the Colorado River. So that's somewhere in Arizona. See, that's the first written, documented Chicano. So it was a town.
What year was this?
It's a 15, was it 15 something? 1500s, like mid 1500s. And yeah, next one. So it's an old word. And then the next documented usage of the word that I could find is from this newspaper, La Crónica, which was out of Texas. And it kind of shows you how the word was used to refer. So they're talking about street vendors, right? We have received word from Houston that a tamal business established by Chicanos sells its tamales in the street, yelling red hot tamales, red, white, and green, the Mexican flag in. If this is true, those disgraceful people are an embarrassment to any flag, and the Mexican people in Houston should take steps to protest. This low behavior, because of the ignorance of such men, our people are held in low esteem and not appreciated in Texas. See, so it kind of uses the word like offensively, like, oh, these street vendors selling tamales. That's why they don't like us, because they're street vendors, they sell tamales. Does that sound familiar? Well, Texas.
I think now it's gonna be important, sorry.
In the early 1900s, Chicano was used to describe recently arrived Mexicanos and or those with more indigenous features. And on the bottom, I just put, my father tells me how my great grandfather, a very indigenous looking man, would refer to recently arrived Mexicanos as los Chicanos. At that point, they, Mexicanos from here, technically Chicanos, identified as Mexicanos de aquí. So see, it was used like, oh, los Chicanos, acaban de llegar, los Chicanos. They're in the field working with us, pues son los Chicanos, they just came. So that's the way it was used.
I'm just gonna click on, so if you guys give me a second to just, handle that, because it's.
Yeah.
I don't know why it doesn't just let me. Oh, mhm.
Chicano at this time, since the term was descriptive of an indigenous phenotype, it was considered a negative slur by many. So like calling someone Indio or something like that, which is not a bad thing, but because of colonization, you're taught to think, oh, that's a bad thing, no. Also Indio. Chicano. Excuse me. In Pachuca era, 1930s, 1940s. As more people moved to the cities from rural areas and or from Mexico and established themselves here in Aztlan, their children in the more rudimentary form began seeing themselves as distinct. They weren't exactly Mexicano like their parents. They also recognized their socioeconomic class status in U.S. society also in a rudimentary manner. So in other words, by rudimentary, I mean is people sometimes they don't have the words, but they know what you're talking about, right? They understand a lot of concepts, but they don't have the words for it. They're not college professors or anything like that. People aren't usually reading theory or political theory or economics or anything like that, but they understand stuff, the average person. So they saw how, well, we're not Mexicanos like my parents when this whole area was rural or when they came from Mexico. We're not like that. We're something different. We're not exactly American because they don't accept us as full on supposedly American. So they started identifying as another type of people. Marked by racial violence and discrimination, segregation and poverty, and the whole identity coming into question as the US entered World War II, many began to identify as Chicano, especially for those that identify with the barrio, with being poor, brown, and discriminated. They were not Mexicano like their parents, but they also would never be accepted as fully American. See, so it started coming like, hey man, we're different. You know, not different as in we're white, you know, but we're different. We have a whole other culture, a way of speaking, talking, todo eso, ¿verdad? And it's not American, and it's not exactly Mexicano. As the 1960s came in, the revolutionary anti-colonial nationalists and socialist slash communist movements of the world inspired the social movements inside of the USA, including the Chicano movement. So there's images of, you know, different heroes from history, the Leila Khalid, Palestinian, right there, the compañera,
Mhm.
and other compañeros, Che, Fidel, Amilcar, Ho Chi Minh, una guerrillera from Vietnam. You know, so they all inspired the movement. They inspired all the movements in the US, right? But obviously, something like that, nationalistic, which means that they united a whole bunch of poor, oppressed, colonized people as one, was gonna inspire Chicanos. Inspired Africans también, and inspired Chicanos. Inspired Puerto Ricans, inspired, you know, the American Indian movement. Obviously, Chicanos are also gonna be inspired by that. But what actually moved people was their actual everyday lives. As a colonized people, that is a people who have a relationship that extracts from their people, from us as a whole, to give to another. Identity always plays an important role. A colonizer, first and foremost, attempts to erase the colonized subject's history and culture, their identity. Doing this makes the colonized easier to manipulate, and they in turn will offer less resistance. If a group of people under oppressive conditions do not identify with each other, they will not form bonds that unite and will not organize to alter their situation. To understand that you have a common relationship with others means that you are gaining a certain type of consciousness. As a working class person, economically, this means class conscience. When you gain a class conscience, as a colonized person, this means national consciousness and a sense of nationhood and a nationalism developed from the oppressed. So that's when you understand it. You know, I might not know other people in Texas, but they're like me, they're Chicanos. You know, or as a worker, I might not know everyone that works with me, but we're all workers. We all have this consciousness that unites us. Hello to everyone. I think the light kind of threw people off, no? Because it was usually darker when we were doing the other ones.
Yeah, because it was
Yeah.
the winter.
Because I got some texts, some people right now like, oh, we'll be there at 7. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna try to click as many so we don't have to go back to this.
Ernesto, I have a question.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the term when you hear poach? Like, so when someone calls someone like, you're not here or from there, they call you poche.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I've been called for.
I don't really like that.
Yeah, I know.
Because it kind of, you know, it's kind of like putting down, you know, like when they're, or even like the word now it's kind of trending, like no sabo.
Yeah.
When they kind of treat
yeah.
a Chicano that doesn't know Spanish, like, oh, you're not a real Mexican. It's like, come on, man. I mean, the way Spanish is perceived in this country is disparaging, you know, like, oh, you speak Spanish. It's not associated with Spain, it's associated with being Mexican and being poor, you know, so, and then further back you go in history, people used to be hit for speaking Spanish. My dad, you know, lo regañaban for speaking Spanish in the school and they would sit him outside, you know, so a lot of people from that generation, it was shamed out of them, you know, and some parents, they were like, well, I don't want my kids to be hit or discriminated, so I'm not gonna teach them Spanish, which is not the best, you know, but it happened, you know, so I think, I don't think, I don't like that, and I think it's very, very offensive, ¿verdad? I mean, I think you should know Spanish. I think you should learn it, if you have children, I think you should teach them. But then there's a whole reality of why a lot of Chicanos do not know Spanish or don't speak it, you know?
Yeah.
Then this is a quote from Rosalio Munoz, he organized, one of the organizers of the Chicano moratorium. And I just like the quote because it kind of shows you what perspective people were coming from, you know? And it says, the Vato Loco is the very spirit of the Chicano movement. So he's associating Chicano with being working class, with being lumpen, or with being, you know, from the barrio, with, you know, the average person. So when the 1960s came about, many Chicanos naturally began to identify as Chicanos because the term was used disparagingly to describe something that all Chicanos mainly are economically and quote unquote racially poor and native. Chicano, Chicana, because being native is something to be proud of, and being a working class person is not shameful. But most importantly, because Chicana and Chicano came from the people themselves. It came from us. Like no one said, oh, you're gonna call yourself this. It came from us. It was already there, you know? Chicano had already been in use a generation before them by barrio youth who saw how they lived distinctly from Mexicanos in Mexico. Chicano was being used defiantly by barrio youth all across Aztlan already, so it only made sense to adopt it and show pride in having indigenous origins and belonging to the poor and working class. So even look at, you know, all the imagery from the movimiento, be brown and be proud, all that stuff to show that pride in being brown, being red, being indigenous, being native. Even being Mexicano to a point, you know? There's a quote from my dad. In my grandfather's time, 1900s, 1930s, identity within the Chicano community had a variety of definitions, depending on where they were. Publicly, in front of the Anglo, he was a Spanish surname. That was the word they used to call us before. That was the Latinx back then. Spanish surname person. But in La Colonia, among themselves, he or she identified as a Mexicanos de aquí, Mexican from here. Yet there was another identity that existed among La Raza in those days, which was Chicano. In those days, it was used to refer to more quote unquote Indio native looking people who generally were campesinos and worked on the fields or many citrus groves in the San Fernando Valley. There are various interpretations as to the origin of Chicano, yet the most important fact is that Chicano grew out of the Chicano community itself. It was the creation of the people. No professor, political, or government invented it. So it comes from us. It comes from us. It's our own identity. Chicano gave a face to the faceless. The word more accurately described us, and it came from us. It united a very diverse people. Generally, Chicanos are considered quote unquote Mexican Americans because although for the most Chicanos have Mexican origins, a Chicano could be someone with origins in a tribe north of the US imposed border, someone with generations already here, or someone that just crossed the border or was born in Mexico. It also made us accept ourselves entirely for who we are now. The word made us accept ourselves in all our Indianness, quote unquote Indianness, accept our Mexicanidad, and accept ourselves with all the scars of colonialism. It helped us accept our culture and history as valid enough to be recognized with the same respect given to others. So we said, this is who we are. This is who we are right now. We don't have to pretend to be who we were before. We don't have to pretend to be someone else. This is who we are right now. And that's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with it. Might not be quote unquote pure, but what is really pure? This is who we are. We're Chicanos, we're Chicanas. And in other words, let me go to the next slide. Chicano means power. Just like an abused person achieving self-confidence, a colonized people achieving national identity, so that's an important term, give them the confidence to act in their own favor. It gives us agency. We think for ourselves. No one else will be telling us, you know, you do this, you do that, this is who you are, this is who you aren't. We will say who we are. We will say where we belong. And nobody will tell us otherwise. That's the case for any colonized people. When we self-named ourselves Chicano, Chicana, all we were saying in essence was, this is our human experience. This is how we interpret our humanity. as this group of people in this part of the world under these conditions. Accept us and let us sit at the table of nations with our sisters and brothers of the world. So that's all we're saying. You know, any identity, any national identity throughout the world, you're really just saying, I'm a human being, but I'm coming from this perspective. Chicano is the same thing. We're human beings in this part of the world. This is how we've developed throughout history. Just accept us. That's all we're asking for. We're not saying we're better. We're obviously not saying we're worse than anybody. We want to just be accepted as equals. Chicano is valid. Chicana is valid. To define yourself is the initial step in resistance. And there's this quote by Kwame Ture, and it's on YouTube as well. Power begins on the level of conception. So when you imagine something, that's where it all starts. So when we started calling each other Chicano, Chicana, it all started from there. That meant power. So yeah, you want to check that out. It's called Using Your Consciousness to Free the People. It's on YouTube. Kwame Ture, who he was an organizer with SNCC, and then he organized the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And he was always in solidarity with La Raza Unida and Chicano. And our famous Ruben Salazar that we're talking about. A Chicano is a Mexican American with a non-Anglo image of themselves. And that's from his article, Who is a Chicano and what is the Chicano wants. So right there, you're seeing that we're defining ourselves. ¿Verdad? We're saying this is who we are. And he was murdered at the Chicano moratorium in 1970. Assassinated. I always share this image of the Chicano moratorium because it shows the essence of being Chicano and all the slogans. As you can see in the middle of banner that says Indians of all tribes. What more clearly can a Chicano be? And then all the slogans around it. Chicano power there, Chicano power here, Viva la Raza, and the banner over there that says Aslan in the back. The People's Resolution. Yeah. I think it's very symbolic of Chicanismo. It is no coincidence that in the epoch when we most gained a national identity, Chicano power period, we moved. When we gained that identity, that consciousness, we began to move as a people. We created murals. All the murals that came out of the Chicano movement were inspired by the Chicano movement, or the Chicano power period, I should say. 1965 to 75, around those times. You know. We created music. All the music that came out of the Chicano movement or the Chicano power period, I mean, ¿verdad? Santana, who doesn't know Santana, Malo, Los Lobos. What's her name? She's from here. Well, yeah, there you go. Yeah, you know, all these expressions, cultural Chicana expressions. You know, the Midnighters. Yeah. We started creating, you know, we started expressing ourselves as Chicanas, as Chicanos. And it had an impact. I mean, who doesn't know this music? And many other cultural expressions. So, I mean, lowriders, teatro, ways of dressing, all that kind of stuff. Or that all just a Chicano expression. Coming out of, you know, the barrios of Aztlán. Coming out of our experience as a people. No.
Just a question, sorry, which is the information of Aztlán. What is that neighborhood?
That's usually what we call the Southwest, the land.
All right.
Taken over by the United States.
All right. Okay. Sorry, I'm not familiar with that. Thank you.
And I have a whole presentation on that. I'll share it with you.
Okay.
And as we develop proudly into our own human selves as Chicanas and Chicanos, as we began to move in our own self-determined direction, we walked right into reality and collided with those that dominate our land and lives. So we gained this confidence, right? We gained this identity that helped us all move together as a people. That made us collide with the people and the system that controls us. That's different images of conflict between the colonizer, the United States, and the Chicano people. The tank over there, that's in New Mexico after the Alianza, when they were fighting for the land grants, this is how they rounded up people. Come out of their little pueblitos over there, that's New Mexico, not Mexico, New Mexico. Ricardo Falcon, who was a leader in La Raza Unida, he was assassinated in New Mexico also. That's from a news clipping from Colorado, US government versus Chicano people. Farm workers, a sister being brutalized by the police. Over here, upon these ruins, we will build a movement 10,000 times stronger. If you don't know about them, that's Los Seis de Boulder. And they were Chicano students who were part of UMAS, which was the precursor to Mecha, one of the precursors to Mecha in Boulder, Colorado. They had gone on strike over there. The students, they were demanding Chicano studies. And if you could see those two cars, they got blown up. Those were 6 students that were murdered or assassinated for wanting Chicano studies, for organizing on their campus. They were also registered Raza Unida members, by the way. So that's Los Seis de Boulder. Over here is when they attacked the Crusade for Justice offices, también in Colorado. And they destroyed the whole building. And in the middle is a burning sheriff's car during the East LA, the Battle of East LA, Chicano moratorium. And there's obviously a lot more stuff, right? But it's just showing how we collided with our colonizer. Like there was a violent confrontation. In those years, there's a quote from Roberto Cinti Rodriguez, may he rest in power. He passed away last year. In those years, to call yourself a Chicano was the equivalent of committing a crime. It was sacrilegious. Even among our raza, the word was looked down upon. To Gabachos, it was rebellion, it was war. And that's what the word came to stand for, resistance and defiance. Gabachos declared war on the word Chicano and all those who used it. So you could look, if you, it's not online, actually. His last book, I forgot what it's called, you know, or one of his last books. You'll find that article. We declared war on the word Chicano by Roberto C. Rodriguez. He was from East LA also. So you see, there was power in that word. In a word, there was power. And this is from a Raza Unida document. It's called Somos Chicano Mexicano. And just think about, you know, how, you know, there's all this argument today about Latinx and all that. Just think about this when you read this. This was written back in 1980 or published back in 1980. As a people, there has always been a struggle against the branding and hyphenation of our national identity by the overpowering Anglo-capitalist system. In the past, as in the present, La Raza has always had to ward off such names as Mexican Indian, Savage, Latin American, Spanish American, Mexican American, and now the new vendido term is Hispano. Some of these vendido Hispanos try to dilute our force by claiming that there is no importance in the name. Before we impose on ourselves their more accepted term Hispano, Hispanic, Hispanic, it is important that we understand our historical development. And listen to this. By accepting the branding or hyphenation by the Anglo system, we permit ourselves and history to be manipulated and virtually put our destiny in their hands, making us their subjects again. So you let someone else name you, you're letting them already have power over you. When your people already have named themselves. You know, and so I'm not arguing that you gotta call yourself a Chicano. I mean, I would emphasize that, but I want you to think about that. You know, all these words that have come about decade after decade, there's a new word, there's a new phrase. What are we gonna call these people this time? We are letting them already have power over us by doing that simple act. It's like if someone didn't, like whatever your name might be. And then someone else comes and break into your house and they say, well, that's not your name, that's not even your last name. You're called Pancho Rodriguez or something, you know, and you're like, what? No, I'm not. It's not my name. Well, that's AI. Little Chicanita thinking yo soy Chicana, and Uncle Sam, this decade you will now call yourself blank, whatever. Take a pick from all the names they've given us over decades. There's more than that, obviously. There's some more insulting than that. Yeah. Letting them label you, you will lose your human qualities. In a hyper-materialist, consumer capitalist society in decay, you will further become a product, a commodity, no longer a human being, no longer part of a collective mass of humanity that has struggled and has a history and distinct culture. These words, they just, I mean, even the new words, they just make you like a barcode. Beep, there's your identity. You're not a human being. You're not this idea of a Chicano or even a Mexicano or whatever. You know, you're not all these people that have a history, that have struggled, that you can see in the streets, that you can see, you know, the carne y hueso and all that, you know, you're not that. You're this new term that is convenient to the United States. Convenient for their needs, you know, to put us in their little box. And poop there, I put them like a product on the shelf. That's where they go. You're no longer this human being that calls yourself a Chicana or Chicano. It's from Gloria Anzaldúa. Chicanos did not know we were a people until 1965 when Cesar Chavez and the farm workers united. And I and Joaquin, that's a poem that's online. If you haven't seen it, it's great. It's also on YouTube. It was written by Jorge Gonzalez. Was published, and La Raza Unida Party was formed in Texas. With that recognition, we became a distinct people. Something momentous happened to the Chicano. So we became aware of our reality and acquired a name and a language, Chicano Spanish, that reflected that reality. Now that we had a name, some of the fragmented pieces began to fall together. Who we were, what we were, how we had evolved. We began to see glimpses of what we might eventually become. So, you know, that's a good quote because I think it kind of shows what we're talking about. You know, like started gaining this identity, this consciousness. You started imagining all these other things that didn't make sense. Now they started making sense, right? But because we gained this consciousness, we began to be able to like think about the future. The Chicano people therefore developed out of first and foremost the experience of Mexican-native people in the territories occupied by the United States since 1848. As time passed and waves of migrants arrived and settled where prior Raza had already been, they inherit the Chicano experience because they then live under the same conditions as other Chicanos. This not only is from Mexicano migration, but also from migration from Central America to Aztlan. And I'll talk about this, and then there's another quote which kind of shows you how this has already happened. The US sponsored terror wars against Central America, in particular El Salvador and Guatemala, forced Raza from those countries to migrate north. It's still forcing more Raza to migrate from there. That's like a poster that Raza Unida made back then, because we were always in solidarity with the struggles that were going on back then in the 80s. Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, you know, all those revolutionary struggles that Raza were working over there. So we made that poster Somos Uno por Nicaragua. And it includes Aztlan right there, see, so part of it. This horrible thing over here. Cheap actor. Their children of the Raza that came from Central America would be socialized as millions of other Chicanitos before them under the same conditions, thus inheriting the Chicano condition. So I say this because Chicano goes further than just Mexican American. You know, it's this experience, this new like nationality that's been developing, which includes people that are not always technically Mexican American. You know, there's a lot I've met throughout my times. I'm sure you all have met Raza from Central American origin, Raza that are half, Raza that are, you know, white, black, etc. And they identify as Chicano. Are they Mexican, Mexicano? No. Are they Chicano? Yes. Why not? How are they not Chicano? So I get this quote, and I used it in the other presentations, but I think it exemplifies that a lot. And it exemplifies how this has already happened in our history. It's a quote from Aztecas del Norte, written by Jack Forbes, who was native. And he wrote this book. He grew up in El Monte, not too far from here, amongst Chicanos. So he wrote a whole book about Chicanos, Aztecas del Norte. So it says this: Analco, that's a place in New Mexico, the birthplace of the Chicano. On August 15th, 1680, armed Native American rebels of the Tano, Tewa, Taos, Picuris, Jemes, and Apache nations entered Analco, the Mexican, Nahuatl or Aztec barrio next to Santa Fe in New Mexico. a Tano leader met with Governor Otermin of the Spaniards and told him that the rebels carried two banners, one bearing red and the other white. The red symbolized the war, which the Spaniards could choose, while the white symbolized the peace, which would prevail if the European invaders agreed to abandon New Mexico. The Indian freedom fighters asked that all classes of Indians who were in our power, says Otermin in a letter of 1680, be given up to them, both those in the service of the Spaniards and those of the Mexican nation of that suburb of Analco. He demanded also that his wife and children be given up to him, and likewise that all Apache men and women whom the Spaniards had captured in war be turned over to them, inasmuch as some Apaches who were among them were asking for them. And then it continues on the next one. We must be very grateful that Otermin wrote that down, because it tells us, listen to this part, it's powerful. It tells us so much about the history of the Chicano and of the ancient unity of La Raza Indígena, the indigenous race. Here we not only see that the Pueblo and Apache freedom fighters were concerned about the liberation of their Mexican brothers from Spanish tyranny, but we also see that the Indian town of Analco was already pan-Indian, with Apache, Pueblo, and Mexican servants and slaves all living together under the common yoke of the European oppressor. Is it not from this common oppression that the Chicano has been born? An Indian with no tribe, an Indian of many tribes, or a mestizo born of the rape of his Indian mother? Isn't that what we're born from, as Chicanos? I mean, think about it. What is a Chicano, even up to today? Again, there's Chicanos that are obviously born here. Maybe their families have been here for a long time. There's Chicanos that weren't even born here. They crossed the border. They were born in Mexico. They were born in Guatemala. They were born in Salvador. There's Chicanos that are half white, half black, half Filipino, full Filipino. I've met all sorts of raza like that. They identify as Chicano. How are they not Chicano? We're all living under the common yoke of the oppressor. We're all living under colonialism, under the boot of the United States. And it forms this new people called the Chicanos, the Chicanas. So this has already happened in our history. And that's what this quote, I find it so powerful, because it's saying how this already happened at one point, and it united all these people, all these indigenous people to fight the Spanish and drive them, because they drove them out of Mexico. This is during the Popez Rebellion. Yes. Chicano who drink water. Me dicen compañera, have you drank water? Yeah, yesterday. The Chicano, the Chicana, therefore can bridge, and this is important. It shows the power that we have. Native North America and Latin America. We can bridge those two worlds. I mean, that's the power that we represent. We have a connection to both. There's Chicanos that are native. There's Chicanos that have a parent from the Reds or one of the native nations. I mean, look at Los Angeles. Look at the tribes that are here. They are Chicanos. And I say that with full respect. They are Chicanos. They're probably the first Chicanos then. The first Mexicans of this land were from the people from that tribe. These tribes around here. And we have obviously Chicanos with origins in what today is Mexico, Centro America, Sudamerica. So we are able to bridge those two worlds simply by being Chicanos, by being Chicanas. Chicano is resistance. The existence of a Chicana or a Chicano is very much a threat to the United States. Chicanos, Mexicanos number in the tens of millions and integrate non-Mexican, even non-native descent people into their communities and families because of sheer numbers and historical presence. Chicanos present an organic and indigenous alternate nationality, which dialectically, that means has developed in conjunction and coming out of, in opposition to the American project. Chicanos not only have the numbers, but also historical, political, and economic claim to a fourth of the US national territory simply by being Chicana or Chicano. I wanted to explain what I said over there a little bit more. The United States, which began in the East, remember, it began in the East, it didn't begin over here. As a mixture of Europeans, mainly English settlers, who all together became a new nation, American, created its own contradiction in the West by invading and creating an indigenous workforce, because we are workers, we are working class people, out of a portion of the people indigenous to the Southwest, mainly Mexican and subsequent Mesoamerican migrants. These people are the Chicanos, Chicanas. So they created us out of, they needed people to work. So they've allowed migration. They demonize the migrant, but they need the migrant. And the migrants have come into areas that have already been populated by their people. And that group of people have become the Chicanas and the Chicanos. This is why the United States is very much invested in erasing everything that we are and have created for ourselves, starting with the name that we gave to ourselves and our people. Chicano, Chicana, Chicanex, La Raza, and the name we gave the land that birthed us as Chicanos, Aslan. They will erase and negate our identity, replace it with a new term that serves their interests and not ours. Attack our identity in higher education, where our potential leaders are being educated, and completely wipe it out of any and all educational material. I mean, think about it. At what age are you able to learn? You can learn if you have someone teach you when you're young, but where do most Chicanos learn about being Chicano? College. Why? You should be learning that when you're in kindergarten, pre-K. There should be shows about it on TV that tells you this is who your people are. This is why you should be proud of who you are and how you look and how you speak and all those things. But it's not, because they are invested. The United States needs to erase that from our minds. Needs to, erase that identity that united us. It united us at a point where there was only 8 million of us. It united a big portion of us, and that's where we moved. You think they want that when there's 40, 50 million plus raza? So they need to attack it, and they replace it with some other word that they make up. They make up all those other words. Everything from wetback to Latinx to all those words, they have made them up. We didn't make those up. The only ones that we have made up has been Chicana or Chicano. That's come from our people. La raza. That's come from our people. Mexican, this is from a quote, and I would emphasize that you see this video. It's on I guess it cut off. It's called 500 Years of Indigenous Resistance. It was a presentation made by La Raza Unida, and it was very eloquently read, and the speech was given by Daniel Osuna, who is still in La Raza Unida. He's an elder in the partido now. It was a very powerful presentation. It was made in the 90s when there was something called a quincentennial. So, the governments in the Americas, quote unquote, Americas, they were celebrating 1492 to 1992. 1492, of course, when Columbus, his pirate, got lost and we found him. And but they wanted to celebrate it as something great, like, oh yay, Columbus. And the Chicano movement and the indigenous movements were like, hell no, that's a horrible thing. That's the start of a genocide. That's the start of colonization. So the partido with a lot of other organizations, but we did a lot of anti-quincentennial events, protests, demonstrations, teach-ins, things like that. And this presentation was very powerful. We look it up, 500 Years of Indigenous Resistance on YouTube. But this is a quote from it. Mexicano, Chicano came before all the other labels. It came before Hispanic. It came before Mexican American. It came before Spanish surname. It came before Latino. It came before Ladino. It came before Beaner. It came before Wetback. It came before illegal alien. It came before all the other labels our colonizer has tried to impose on us, as though they own us, to tell us who we are. So again, if you let someone else name you, you are letting them have control over you. You are letting them subjugate you. The initial step to subjugation is that. And then he continues, my gratitude, respect, and thanks goes out to each and every one of you in this room that still refers to yourself as Chicano Mexicano, for you are showing respect for the ancestry of your origin. And that was Daniel Osuna. Oh, that there is, it didn't come off. 500 years of indigenous resistance. It's on YouTube. So you know this word Chicano, again, I mean, the only reason it survived this long, just like the word Aslan, just like La Raza, is because of our people. The institutions don't push it. They always try to erase it. I mean, even look at the student groups erasing the words Chicano from their names, erasing the word Aslan, making all these crazy accusations about La Raza, you know, online. That's on purpose. That's not coming from them. But the only reason these words continue is because our people continue to use them, because they come from us. They talk about our experience. They give us a face. They give us a face. And this, it's funny if you actually watch it. It's also on YouTube from Culture Clash, Bowl of Beans, and it's talking about that. He's like in a mental ward. And the nurse. My God, with what? The new substance is tropical anal mist. I am a tropical anal mist. It's happening. Yeah, it's on YouTube. This is that little clip right there that kind of, it was written in the 90s. That was in the 90s. It kind of shows you like every single generation, every new word, where they're gonna carve out. Against tropical anal mist.
Just a quick,
You're a nigga, and you're black.
I just got a little visit from some neo-Nazis on the YouTube, on our Zoom, on our live Zoom.
Quite interested in that. That's the Chicano moratorium of 1990. You'll say the Chicano, not Hispanic. Get it right. This is if you guys, it's also on YouTube from Yo Soy Joaquin, and I think it's a good ending towards it because again it shows a lot about who we are, and he's talking, you know, like he gives the whole presentation or this whole poem, this beautiful poem about what is a Chicano or who are we and this and that, and at the very end he says this. Corky Gonzalez again wrote it. And in all the fertile farmlands, the barren plains, the mountain villages, the smoke-smeared cities, we start to move. La raza, Mexicano, Español, Latino, Chicano, and then someone shouts power, or whatever I call myself. I look the same. I feel the same. I cry and sing the same. I am the masses of my people, and I refuse to be absorbed. I am Joaquin. The odds are great, but my spirit is strong. My faith unbreakable. My blood is pure. I shall endure, I will endure. Then it ends. Yay. So yeah, again, you know, we want to do this presentation to talk about where that word comes from, Chicano, what it represents. You know, is to get us thinking about why this word became so powerful amongst our people. Why, and the importance, why so many people, or at least some people still insist, like, I'm a Chicano, I'm a Chicana. It's important to use this word. Why? It's not just because I just like the word, because there's meaning behind it. Because it comes from ourselves. It's an expression of ourselves. It came from the very bottom. Again, it didn't come from any politician saying, you guys are now Chicanos. It didn't come from any book or any professor or anything like that. It came from the people. It came from our own experience to call ourselves a Chicano, to call ourselves a Chicana. And it's a word that has an origin hundreds of years ago. So it holds that weight. And again, when we started identifying with that word, with that phrase, we started creating so much because we were now confident in who we are at this moment, or at least back then, ¿verdad? Like there's nothing to be ashamed about how I look. There's nothing to be ashamed about having indigenous blood. There's no shame in we're campesinos, we're working class people. There's nothing wrong with that. So then who are we? Why are we always listening to someone tell us who we are? Why is someone always telling us we don't belong here when we're the first people here? Who are they to tell us that we don't belong here? So people started thinking about that, and the word has always evoked that power. That's why it's so powerful, and that's why they're always trying to erase it. They're always trying to erase it from our memory. And then, look at how we started creating all these things. Culture started coming about, and we started accepting, this is who we are. We're gonna play some music. We're gonna make these murals, these beautiful murals. I mean, what are Chicanos known for? Murals. And that whole movement came out of the Chicano movement. Music, teatro, the lowriders and all that stuff, the ways of dressing and accepting the way that we talk as valid. Because sometimes you hear people say like, the way we talk, oh, it's not perfect Spanish, without like, oh, ¿qué es eso? Or oh, that's not, what are you even talking English? That's not English. But we talk like this, it's valid enough. We don't need to prove ourselves to anybody. So we started accepting that, man. And that's when we became confident in who we are. And we moved. And it made us clash. There was a violent clash. And it's not to say that we want violence, but that's just what's gonna happen. When a people define for themselves who they are, a colonizer cannot move them no matter what. I mean, look at the Palestinians. Like I said before, the most important thing amongst the Palestinians that they say themselves is that they have already won, because every Palestinian knows they are Palestinian. No matter how old they are, no matter how young they are, no matter if they're man, woman, queer, etc., they are Palestinian, period. And they will fight to the very death, to the end,